Hey everyone. We've got some big weather changes coming up over the next couple of weeks. And in this video, we're going to break down everything you need to know about what's coming in the forecast. From more snow to the potential for severe weather and even some cold blasts, I've got you covered with all the details. So let's dive right in. Over the next couple of weeks, we're looking at multiple storm systems impacting the United States. That means we're going to see more snowfall, the possibility of severe weather, and plenty of shots of cold air between now and early February. There's even the potential for another large storm that could bring both winter weather and severe storms as we get into the latter part of the month. We've got a lot to talk about. So let's start by taking a look at the weather conditions across the country this morning. The good news is we're finally done with that historic winter storm that brought so much snow to the Gulf Coast. I'm sure you remember how intense it was. We had areas along the Outer Banks in North Carolina getting up to 8 to 10 inches of snow, and even Milton, Florida, so nearly 10 inches in just one day. That broke the record for most snow in a single day in Milton, which had been 4 inches all the way back in 1954. So yeah, this was definitely a big deal. In fact, a lot of daily snowfall records were broken across the region, including places like New Orleans. But the storm has moved on now and we're done talking about it. But before we get into details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. What we're left with is some pretty dreary conditions. We've got some scattered clouds moving across the Gulf Coast and stretching all the way into Florida. That's keeping things pretty chilly and preventing any sunshine from breaking through. Fortunately, that's going to stick around for at least the next 24 hours. So it's going to feel kind of gloomy for a while, but don't worry, things will start to warm up as we get closer to the weekend and we'll see milder weather returning. Up in the Northeast, there's some light snow flurries possible today, but overall, it's pretty quiet. No major snowstorms to report right now, just some minor snow showers and cloudy skies. As for the rest of the country, it's really calm right now. Not a lot of major weather events happening, but one thing I do want to mention is a wildfire in Southern California. This one is serious. It started yesterday and quickly spread from 500 acres to nearly 10,000 acres in just a few hours. The fire is located just north of Los Angeles near Santa Clarita, and there have been a lot of evacuation orders issued. Fortunately, the winds aren't as intense as they were a couple of weeks ago when we had hurricane force winds, but they're still strong enough to spread this fire rapidly. A few structures have been damaged, so our thoughts are with everyone in Southern California dealing with this. It's rare to see fires of this magnitude in January, especially with the Santa Ana winds. So we're hoping that the rain expected later this weekend will help control the situation, but it's definitely something to watch. Now let's shift gears a little bit. Check out this crazy satellite image from yesterday afternoon. It shows all the snow that fell across places like Texas, Georgia, the Carolinas, and even Florida. Look at all that cloud cover over Florida. It's wild to think about how much snow covered the ground down there. Honestly, this is the kind of winter storm you don't see very often, and some of these areas might not see snow like this again for decades, if not longer. If you still got snow on the ground, enjoy it while it lasts, because most of it is going to be gone by tomorrow afternoon. The snow will likely melt pretty quickly, except for some areas in Georgia, South Carolina, and eastern North Carolina, which might hold on to a bit of snow for a while longer. But for the most part, by tomorrow afternoon, most of that snow will be history. It's kind of crazy to think that areas like Iowa and the Dakotas currently have less snow on the ground than places like Louisiana, Florida. It just goes to show how unusual this storm really was. We're in the middle of January, and that's just not something we expect to see. Yeah. Let's talk about the big weather changes coming our way. The weather patterns over the next couple of weeks are going to be vastly different from what we've been dealing with so far this winter. One of the key things to watch is the jet stream, which is really going to affect what happens over the next several days. Today, the jet stream winds are really strong, stretching from Texas all the way up to the Northeast. So if you're flying today, especially from Florida to the Midwest or vice versa, expect a bumpy ride because the winds are really strong aloft. But as we get into Friday and Saturday, the jet stream is going to change a lot. The winds are going to flatten out, which means we'll see a more zonal flow. Basically, winds moving from west to east. This kind of flow usually brings milder weather and much calmer conditions to most of the country. So things are going to calm down this weekend for most of the U.S. That's definitely a positive, right? However, one thing to note is that on Saturday, there's a little dip in the jet stream over the West Coast. And this is important for a couple of reasons. First, it's going to bring some moisture to California this weekend, which will help with the wildfires, but there's a risk that any thunderstorms that form could actually spark new fires. So it's something to keep an eye on. The second thing to note is that this dip in the jet stream is going to move slowly into early next week. And by Monday, it's still going to be hanging around the West Coast. This is likely going to be the next big storm system for the US. By Wednesday of next week, that trough will be moving over the Rockies. And from there, it will start heading towards the Great Plains and the Ohio Valley. This storm could bring heavy snow and possibly severe weather. But since it's still about 6 to 8 days away, we're not 100% sure of its exact path or intensity. One thing to keep in mind is that this storm is taking a similar path to the one we saw a couple of weeks ago, where areas like Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas saw up to 12 inches of snow. I'm not saying this storm will be identical to that one, but it's definitely taking a similar track. Looking even further ahead, the GFS model is hinting at even more Arctic blasts coming our way as we move into early February. It's still a bit far out, but I'm definitely keeping an eye on this. There's a lot of uncertainty, but it looks like we could see a major cold snap at some point, so be ready for that. Let's focus on the weekend. There will be some light to moderate snow moving across the Great Lakes, and the Rockies will see some snow showers as well. Over in California, we'll get some rain, which will help with the wildfire situation. As we move into next week, the weather starts to get a little more interesting. We'll see some moisture coming up from the Gulf, which could lead to showers and thunderstorms in the deep south. This could also result in some snow in the Four Corners region in Southern California. So that's a good sign for the ongoing wildfires there. By early next week, we'll also have a winter storm in Canada, which could bring snow to the Northeast, but it's still a bit uncertain exactly how much snow will fall or where it will hit. That'll be something to keep an eye on as we get closer to the weekend. Moving into the middle of next week, we could see a winter storm developing over the Rockies and moving into the southern plains. This storm could bring some rain and snow to the deep south and the Gulf Coast. And by the end of the week, we might see a snow and ice event in the Ohio Valley and the Northeast. The Canadian model shows a similar setup, but with a slightly different track. And the European model shows that this disturbance could turn into a massive nor'easter by the end of next weekend. It's still a bit far out to make any solid predictions, but I'm confident that we'll see some sort of winter weather event sometime next week, likely around February 2nd or 3rd. Just don't expect to have all of the details right away, as forecasting this far out is always tricky. Meanwhile, out west, there's something pretty interesting happening in Southern California. A cut-off low-pressure system is sitting offshore, and that could bring some much-needed precipitation to parts of the state. This is really important because of the ongoing wildfire concerns, especially east of San Diego, where a major wildfire just started a few hours ago. Any moisture in that region would be incredibly beneficial. And while we're not looking at a major storm, even light rain could help slow the spread of fires and improve conditions. Shifting over to temperature trends for the rest of this week and into the weekend, we've still got some lingering Arctic air hanging around the central and eastern US, but it's on the move. That last push of really cold air is shifting east, and by Friday, we'll see temperatures starting to rebound in the plains and upper Midwest. That doesn't mean it's going to be warm, though. There will still be some chilly air hanging around, just not as brutally cold as what we just went through. In terms of precipitation, we're still dealing with lake effect snow across the Great Lakes. Areas around Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario are all seeing persistent snow bands, and those will continue through tonight and into Friday. If you're in these areas, be mindful that travel could become difficult, especially in those heavier snow bands. Western New York, the upper peninsula of Michigan, and western lower Michigan are all likely to see some significant snowfall, with some areas picking up several more inches before the weekend. We also have a clipper system dropping down from Canada, bringing some surprise snowfall to parts of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the northern U.S. This will affect areas like North Dakota, northern Minnesota, and the upper Great Lakes on Friday and into Saturday. That system will continue moving east and could bring some light snow into southeastern Canada, upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and northern Maine by Sunday. Now, let's talk about the drought situation in the Southwest. Yes, it's a desert, so it's always dry, but the drought in Southern California has been getting worse, and that's not helping with the wildfire situation at all. The good news is that we do have some moisture on the way. It's not going to be a major storm, but by Saturday night, we should start seeing rain return to parts of California, especially in the foothills in Southern California. Higher elevations in the Sierras will likely see some snow, while lower elevations get some beneficial rain. This pattern will continue into early February with isolated spots potentially picking up over an inch of rain. Definitely helpful, even if it's not enough to completely turn things around. Looking ahead to next week, the pattern is shaping up to be very active across the lower 48. The European model shows another clipper system moving through the upper Great Lakes and Ontario early in the week, which is consistent with the pattern we've been seeing. But by Wednesday, we have to start watching a developing system in the southern plains. This one could bring snow to Colorado and New Mexico, rain to Texas and Oklahoma, and even the potential for thunderstorms by Thursday. By next weekend, we could be looking at a much larger winter storm developing in the Midwest and Great Lakes. Both the European and GFS models are showing this potential, but the details are still uncertain. The timing, the track, and the exact areas impacted will likely shift over the next several days, but the fact that both models are hinting at a significant storm means it's something we need to be paying attention to. Looking even further ahead into early February, we're going to see another pattern shift. That strong Arctic air we just had won't push quite as far south this time. I said we've got a ridge of high pressure building over the south and southeast, keeping things milder there, while the colder air stays locked into the northern plains, northwest US, and parts of southwest Canada. And here's where things get even more interesting. February 1st through 8th is showing signs of a very stormy setup. We could be dealing with a significant system bringing heavy rain and severe weather on the warm side and snow, sleet, and freezing rain on the cold side. The European model shows a parade of storms coming off the Pacific and tracking across the Rockies and northern US, while the GFS highlights the potential for a winter storm around February 3rd or 4th. For in cities like Minneapolis, Des Moines, Omaha, Chicago, Milwaukee, or Green Bay. This could finally bring some of the snow you've been missing. Meanwhile, the southern side of these systems could bring another round of heavy rain and thunderstorms. Of course, we're still several days out, so the details will change the snowfall amount and the areas impacted. But the key takeaway here is that we are heading into a very active period and we need to be prepared. Even though we're moving into February, severe weather can happen any time of the year, and we'll be keeping a close eye on both the wintry and stormy sides of these systems. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates. Thanks for watching, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.